My name is Mick Taylor. I am a volunteer at the Wandle Industrial Museum in Mitcham. I am going to take you along the River Wandle, looking at how the river has changed from the hardest working river in the world for its size to somewhere that people want to live and enjoy today. Let's start by looking at sites that have been turned into housing developments. Starting in Wandsworth, this is the entrance to the Ram or Young's Brewery. On the corner, out of picture, is the Ram Inn. A pub has stood here since 1550. The Ram Inn is home to the Side Beast Brewery. Young and Bainbridge took over the brewery here in 1831, and Young's operated there until the site closed in 2006. The site has now been developed, and this picture, taken in April 2016, shows the lift shafts for each of the blocks of flats that have been built on the site. From the old site, the stable block still remains, though as yet the development of the area around it hasn't been completed. The pump house also remains. This has been taken over by Sandbrook's Brewery and will also be a museum and heritage centre celebrating the history of the site and hopefully brewing along the whole of the Wandle Valley. This is how the Wandle site of the development now looks, with the new footbridge from the triangle. This is a picture of the Culvers, a large house on the Culvers estate in Carshalton. It was home to the Reynolds family, who owned a calico printing work business. The house was built in 1790 and demolished in the 1940s. This is a map from 1871. The calico printing works was home to the largest bleaching fields in the country, over 55 acres. They sat here in the southern part of an island formed by the two channels of the River Wandle, here and here. The housing estate was mainly built in the 1930s. It still retains some of the names associated with the Reynolds family, such as Reynolds Close, Culvers Avenue, and Limes Avenue. Limes was a house on the estate. This is a little bit of a diversion, and it's not an industry, but home of a national hero. That hero being Lord Nelson. This is his home, Merton Place, located at South Wimbledon, or formerly Merton. It could be him fishing the lake in the grounds. The water for the lake was known by Lady Hamilton as the Nile, celebrating Nelson's victory there over the French. It was fed by water from the River Wandle. Merton Place was a large estate, as can be seen in this map. Today, all there is of it is a plaque on the wall of a block of flats. The house had been built in 1750 and was demolished in 1823. Let us now look at some of the industrial buildings that have been changed to housing. I could have included this next one in the last category. This is an aerial view of the Connolly Leather Works at Collier's Wood. A mill on this site can be dated back until the Domesday Book of 1086. The site had three mills: Merton Mill, Merton Bridge Mill, and the Paxton Leather Works. Connolly's moved into the site in 1990 and moved out in 1994. Most of the site was turned over to housing, as can be seen in this picture, bar one building. That is this building that spans the River Wandle. This shows the building in the early 1900s before Connolly's took over. Here it is in 1986. And this is it today. The building was reduced to half of its original size and yet retained for some reason. This is a picture pre-1907 that shows 3 of the 4 mills at Mitcham Bridge. In the picture, there are 3 mills: Glover's Snuff Mill, Crown Mill in the centre, and Grove Mill on the left. There's also, you can see, some cottages that we will come back to later. Crown Mill burnt down in 1965 and was later replaced by a block of flats in the same style as the old mill building. Grove Mill was also burnt down. This happened in 1907, but was rebuilt at the time. It continued to be used for industrial purposes until the late 1990s, when it was then converted into housing. Here you can see how the mill has been converted. This is Ravensbury Mill in Malden. It is the potential new home of the Wandle Industrial Museum. It was built in 1800 and did have a large house on the site, the white building you can see. There were other buildings on the site, and you can see from here how they were allowed to go into disrepair when the site was closed in the mid-1980s. Here you can see the main building that has been changed into flats. Behind the grey doors, you can see, are 2 water wheels. It is in this part of the mill, which is our potential new home, along with the building you will see in the centre of the next picture. You can see here other flats built on the site retaining the style of the main mill building. This is Bennington Mill, and this building is part of the mill complex. It's the only one left that was built in 1891. This picture is from 1986. This is a close view of the side of the mill building. The mill was used for snuff and flour production. It was converted into flats about 4 or 5 years ago and now has the name of Wandle Mill. We are now going to look at some of the buildings that have been saved or remained from the industrial past of the river. This is Wandle Villa, which can be found in Fitzbridge Road, Mitcham. It was built by John Anthony Rucker in the 1750s. Within its grounds was a calico printing works owned by Rucker. It was to here that Francis Nixon from Ireland brought his copperplate printing method for textiles. The Hatfield family, who we'll mention again later, lived here for a period. The house was left empty in 1976 and went into disrepair. It was saved and restored in 1980. We are now going to look at a number of workers' cottages and homes that still exist. These could be likened to the mews houses that you find in London and elsewhere. Just down from Wandle Villa are these workers' cottages in Fitzbridge Road. They may have been occupied by the workers from either the calico works at Wandle Villa or the Littler's factory at Merton Abbey. They were built around 1525 and are now managed by the National Trust. This folly made from flint was added in 1870 as a buttress to the end cottage to stop it collapsing. These cottages here can be found in Wandle Bank, Collier's Wood, and were built in the mid-1800s. They were mainly occupied by workers from the Morris & Co. works on Merton High Street. They are listed and sit alongside the mill cut to the former Colony Leathers Works opposite Wandle Bank. They sell for around £600,000. These are Mount Pleasant cottages. This picture was taken shortly after the cottages were built in 1884. Listed buildings, they are reached by a small bridge over the mill cut to Beddington Mill. In 1966, they were bought by Angela Douglas, wife of the actor Kenneth More. These cottages are in Watermead Lane, just off Goat Road on the border of Mitcham and Carlshilton. The brickwork has been much changed. They would have housed workers from either the mills at Goat Bridge or from the tannery that stood next to them. These Victorian cottages are located in Coppermill Lane off Plough Lane, Wimbledon, and house workers from Wimbledon Mill. This mill was formerly a copper mill that supplied the copper vats used by Youngs to brew the beer. It ended life as a level works. We saw these cottages in the earlier picture of the mills at Mitcham Bridge. Some of these cottages were built in 1755 and others later in 1851. They are known locally as the Fisheries Cottages. It could be because there was once a trout fishery in this area, or because an estate agent thought it would be a nice name. We are now going to look at some of the sites along the mill where mills and buildings have been replaced. This is Bennett's Mill that was south of Merton Abbey Mills and sat alongside Bennett's Ditch. These buildings were replaced in the 1960s and the replacement buildings were replaced in the 1980s. This is what we now have in their place, a series of block of flats known as Bennett's Courtyard. This picture shows the works of Merton Abbey that were taken over by William Morris in 1885. This shouldn't be confused with the Liberty Print Works, which are now Merton Abbey Mills. The buildings in this picture date from 1752 and remained until 1940, when the works closed and the site was bombed during World War II. The site was taken over by new Merton Board Mills until they were demolished in the 1980s. Today, the Trellis Care Homes, Trellis being a William Morris pattern, sits on the West Bank portion of where the Morris works were located. I talked earlier about the cottages in Coppermill Lane, Wimbledon. This is the manager's house for Wimbledon Mill when it was in use by Shooters, the leather company. The house was flooded quite often from the River Wandle. It was demolished in 1970 and today it is home to an electrical substation. I want to end this presentation by looking at places that have gone from being homes to industrial working use. This house can be found on the industrial estate just off of Budge Lane in Carlshilton. It is on an industrial estate known as the Acorn Trading Estate that once had 3 separate mills. Known as Riverside, it is a Grade 2 listed building now used as offices. This is Honeywood House at Carlshilton Ponds. Originally known as Wandle Cottage, it changed to Honeywood House when the original Honeywood House was demolished. It dates back to the 17th century and was lived in as a home until 1939. The local council purchased it and used it as offices until the 1980s, when it was restored and opened as Honeywood Museum. Strawberry Lodge in Carlshilton, pictured here, is one of my favourite buildings along the River Wandle. It was built by the gunpowder miller Joshua Dewey in the late 1600s. It is one of the oldest buildings in Carshalton and is now used as a conference centre. Note the modern extension to the site. You can find this building known as Malden Cottage in the grounds of Malden Hall Park. It was built in 1750 and was home to the Hatfield family who moved here from Wandle Villa until they moved again into Malden Park Hall, which we are to look at next. The last of the Hatfields, being a bachelor, moved back into the cottage in 1906. It was he, Gillette Hatfield, who when he died in 1941, gave the Malden Hall estate to the National Trust. It was used as offices and as a local council registry office until today it is a community school. Malden Hall was built in the mid-1770s. It was owned by the Garth family, who owned much of the land around Malden. The Hatfield family took it over in 1867. It was used as a convalescence home in the First World War and later as a nursing home by the Salvation Army. In the 1980s and 1990s, it was a restaurant. Today, it is used as a wedding venue. This is Wandsworth, and a view looking towards Wandsworth High Street. Note the housing on both banks of the River Wandle. Today, this is the nearest you can get to that view, looking along Buckhall Road. Southside Shopping Centre is on the right, and offices to the left. Which view do you think looks the best? That concludes this presentation. There may be places that you can identify yourself that have changed. I haven't included everything or everywhere. If you have any questions or would like any further information, then please contact the museum.